Kyle tonight in the middle of midterm season for this panel about the minor in nuclear studies. My name's Avery, I'm a fourth year student in chemical engineering. I'll start off by giving an introduction for each of our panel members tonight, and then we'll go over an overview of the minor, followed by any questions that anyone here has. We also have a bunch of questions that were sent in to us by other students, which we'll go through as well. Okay, so in order of, I guess we'll start on the right and then we'll work our way this way. We have Dr. Marcus Piro, an associate professor of engineering physics at McMaster, where he specifically teaches nuclear courses EngPhys 3D04 and EngPhys 4NE3. Prior to this, he's been the Canadian Research Chair in Nuclear Fuel and Material at Ontario Tech and has worked at the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories and Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Dr. Piro is the Director of the Minor in Nuclear Studies and Society. We also have Dr. Jeremy Whitlock, an Associate Professor of Engineering Physics at McMaster. He's previously worked at the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, International Atomic Energy Agency, and Global Security Nuclear Partners in Safeguards and Non-Proliferation. Dr. Whitlock will be the instructor for Nuclear Studies 2N03 in winter 2026. Next we have Kyle Cilio, an educational developer in the Faculty of Engineering, and he's the instructor for Nuclear Studies 1N03 in fall 2025. He's a McMaster Engineering Physics graduate and is part of the team running the minor in Nuclear Studies and Society. And then we also have Carly Mellett, an academic advisor for the Faculty of Engineering in McMaster, where she specifically focuses on iBiomed and engineering physics streams. We're also joined by Lisa Hardy, the academic department manager of the Innovation, Leadership, Engagement, Action, and Discovery Office, which supports all of engineering's interdisciplinary programs and minors, including the minor in Nuclear Studies and Society. All right, so before we get into specific questions, I think it would be helpful to get a general overview of the minor from our panelists. So just a general idea of what the streams are, what the core courses are, what the motivation applications of the minor are, etc. So I don't know if anyone in particular wants to start it off, but just kind of a high-level overview.
Yeah, maybe I'll give us a start. So first, I just want to say thank you to NAYGN for organizing this event. Really appreciate it. You guys are great. Yeah, okay, so for the minor, it was a team effort. I'm just speaking right now, but Kyle we worked very closely together in developing the minor. There were other folks as well on the team, so it was a team effort. We started this a year and a half ago or so, and what we kept hearing from industry was, wow, the industry's growing so fast. There's so many huge projects, and the one thing we keep hearing from our industry partners is, workforce development. Just being able to hire enough people is a major challenge. They're worried they may not have enough people to hire in the nuclear industry just because it's growing so rapidly. That was one thing they told us. And then the second one was, love to get nuclear engineering thoroughbreds, but that's not all we need. We need a lot of people in many different areas, let's say not just in other engineering disciplines like area and materials engineering, or civil engineering, science, physics, chemistry, business, human resources, communications across the spectrum. But what would be great is if they knew something about nuclear coming out of the university. And that's really what drove this minor, is to be able to take those students across all of the programs across McMaster undergrad, bolt on some nuclear knowledge to them, and make them so more job ready. So hopefully it helps streamline the job prospects for you guys. So then we got Kyle here, it's doing the 1N03 course, and then Jeremy's doing the 2N03 course. Maybe I'll pass it over to Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. So to Marcus's point, there is a tremendous amount of people that are behind this minor degree. It started off in engineering, exploring it as a minor in nuclear engineering, and then slowly, as we were having more conversations, it really exploded into a campus-wide effort. Working with our Associate Dean academics, Sarah Dixon-Anderson, talking to the other Associate Deans from the other faculties, curating lists of courses that we felt were relevant to nuclear, forming the different streams that we currently have available in the minor and may have in the future in the minor. It's been a really tremendous effort. Funny enough, I got involved with the nuclear minor because Sarah asked me, hey, can you come for 15 minutes to talk about how you build a minor? And I said, sure. And now, almost 2 years later, here I am running the course. So yeah, while Jeremy and Marcus can speak to the workforce aspect and the job market, I can really speak to just the valuable opportunity that nuclear offers in terms of learning and the different subjects that it offers. And that's the approach that I've taken into 1NO3.
Yeah, so I'm doing 2NO3 in the winter term, and this is following on from Kyle's sort of whirlwind introduction to the world of nuclear, and then I'm going to be focusing on the nexus of nuclear and society. So things like the non-proliferation regime globally and in Canada, the regulatory regime in Canada, the history of the very rich and interesting history of the Canadian program, and also globally, the accidents that have happened and how they have impacted society and how decisions that society has made have influenced the course of the industry or slowed down the industry or almost killed the industry at times. Nuclear in popular culture, stakeholder engagement, indigenous engagement, which is extremely important these days. I should say indigenous partnership, which is how you get things built these days, and how that is being addressed today in the nuclear industry. Did I miss anything? Safety and security policy. So basically it's all the, not the nuts and bolts about how reactors work or the industry itself, but how society sees the industry and how the industry sees society. That's 2NO3. Oh, and on the workforce, let me just add, because I am literally at a conference this week. I came from Toronto attending a CNS conference in disruptive, we said it earlier.
Disruptive, innovative.
Innovative, emerging technology, DIET. Okay, it's a great acronym. But anyway, so it's all like emerging technology and what's new, so AI and robots and drones and how they're going to be used by the nuclear industry. But the point that came up a lot is the workforce and the non-traditional workforce. So that's exactly where, and I was thinking as these people are talking about this on the stage, we're going to need many, thousands of people from the non-traditional areas that are going to be involved in the nuclear program. This is not going to be your grandfather's nuclear industry. You also are going to have those people as well. So you're going to have the core, you're going to have the nuclear engineers and the chemical engineers, the mechanical engineers, all building reactors. But there's going to be this diverse workforce, and therefore people from all different backgrounds that are graduating with a bit of nuclear in their back pocket will have an advantage, I think, in that market.
Amazing, thank you so much. I'll go through some of the questions that were sent in to us by students who are not able to be here today, but if anyone in the audience actually at any point has a question, feel free to raise your hand and ask it. So both Dr. Whitlock and Dr. Bureau, both of you talked about the interdisciplinary nature of the workforce in nuclear moving forward. We had a number of questions about any restrictions on who can register for this minor from different faculties and who students can approach about registering for the minor in the process of declaring that.
Maybe that should go to you.
I can take that one. So the short answer is no, there are no restrictions on who can register for this minor. As Dr. Peer and Dr. Whitlock were mentioning, this is open to students across McMaster. So there is no one program or faculty that this is available to. So students across McMaster do have access to this minor. And approaching about registering for this minor, this isn't a minor that you need to kind of pre-register for, but it is something that you should be talking to your home academic advisor about to ensure that you're putting the courses in to your degree plan in the right way and ensuring that you are able to progress through your home degree as well as pursuing the minor at the same time. Students don't actually declare a minor until the term before they graduate from McMaster. So there is no application process or registration process, but the declaration does take place in your winter term of your graduating year. And at that point, you would be working closely with your academic advisor to make sure you're meeting all of the requirements for the minor.
And kind of a follow-up to that, how many courses can be double counted towards a major as well as the minor?
Yep. So up to 12 units can count towards your major as well as your minor. So we call that double dipping sometimes, and you can double dip up to 12 units. So in engineering, it can sometimes be a little bit easier to do that double dipping because a lot of the courses, especially in the nuclear engineering specialization, would potentially be technical electives for our engineering students. But outside of engineering, if your program allows for electives, you could very well be using these to satisfy those credits. That is something you should be talking to your own academic advisor about to ensure that those are meeting your elective requirements for your degree.
And then for students who are maybe a bit further along in their undergrad, so maybe in second or third year at this point, what's the feasibility of trying to integrate this minor into their academic pathway? Is that feasible? Would students more just be looking at taking some of the core courses?
Yeah. So obviously the earlier you start a minor in your degree, the easier it is to fit into your program progression. However, I don't want to deter anyone from starting this minor later on in their degree. It is entirely possible for you to still fit in these courses into your degree later on. If you're willing to study in a spring-summer term potentially, working closely with your academic advisor to make sure that things are slotted in properly, whether that means taking a couple of the minor courses in a spring-summer term, or maybe taking some of your core courses from your faculty in a spring-summer term. If you are starting it relatively late in your degree, there is a chance that we may extend by about a term for your graduation. But sitting with your own academic advisor and coming up with a plan will help you determine exactly how this would fit into your degree.
And it was briefly mentioned some of the core courses that this minor revolves around. I think it'd be a good idea to get a bit more detail on nuclear studies 1N03 and 2N03 and sort of what those courses go over and how they fit into the minor.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to take it because I think Jeremy talked a lot about his course. So 1N03 is really an introduction to the world of nuclear, and actually the working title used to be the world of nuclear early in development. But we spend about 4 hours working on a very basic understanding of the science behind nuclear, just to set the foundation to piggyback off of for the rest of the course. So we talk a little bit about what radiation is, where the term nuclear comes from, all that good stuff. But then in 1N03, we start intersecting with other faculties here at McMaster. And so the way that the course is structured, it's actually quite explicitly structured such that once you get past those first 4 hours, the next topic for about a week is nuclear intersecting with humanities. Then it's nuclear intersecting with social sciences. Not too much, because I don't want to step on Jeremy's toes very much. But for the folks in social sciences, I want you to get a taste of what kind of place you have at the table when it comes to nuclear. We're going to need people that can report responsibly when they're doing journalism or telling stories. We're going to need people that can meet people where they are in the area where nuclear facilities might be built to discuss those fears and anxieties that people may have. So that's how the first half of the course is structured. Is what does it actually look like in terms of intersecting with other programs and other faculties? One of the more interesting thought experiments I ran in forming the course was why would a religious studies student care about nuclear? And so that actually turned into one of the lessons for the course. The back half is more about nuclear power in Canada. And tomorrow night is really when we kick that part of the course off. But in a very simple explanation, how does a nuclear reactor work? What are the safety features of a nuclear reactor? What does nuclear power generation look like across Canada today? So that's a little bit about 1N. It's how does nuclear, what is nuclear, first of all? How does it intersect with other faculties and other programs here at McMaster? And then what is the current state of nuclear power across Canada?
Yeah, and so I've already talked a bit about 2N, but basically it takes that social cross-cutting bit and it expands upon it. So I can just read from, since I'm not actually teaching it at this moment, I have to read from the plan. So we at the start we talked about the evolution of the nuclear society interface. So again, this nexus and how it has evolved. So it starts with the war, starts with World War II, and that's when nuclear weapons and nuclear anything came to the public consciousness, and that's the start of the nuclear society interface right there. and that impacts how society sees nuclear energy to this day. You say nuclear, and people think mushroom cloud, and it's because of that event. So basically, it's that evolution. Let me get into the emergence of Canada as a natural resource focus. Emergence of Canada as a natural resource superpower, but focused on the nuclear development. So we are one of the biggest suppliers of uranium in the world. We have we are the developer of one of the two basic nuclear designs out there. And how the heck did that happen? Like, it's a crazy thing. Why Canada? And we started World War II with nobody had any nuclear knowledge, because nuclear fission was basically discovered at the beginning of World War II. And so how did we go from nothing to being, like at the end of World War II, the second biggest nuclear infrastructure, and then developing the second nuclear reactor design, and it's also still around today. So how did that happen? It's extremely interesting. Stakeholder engagement and indigenous engagement, radiation and perceptions of radiation and actual radiation effects, and public health policy, nuclear medicine, the development of radioisotopes, cancer-fighting isotopes. How many people knew that Canada invented cancer therapy with cobalt-60? Meme therapy, besides Lisa. Like basic. So we're Canadians. We don't fly that flag too high. But 1951, the world's very first cobalt-60 cancer therapy machine in London, Ontario, Victoria Hospital, using cobalt-60 made in the NRX reactor at Chalk River. And why? In that case, it's easy, because the NRX was a reactor that can make cobalt-60, and no other reactor on the planet. The only other reactors on the planet were in the U.S. Could make that amount of cobalt-60. So we, instead of making bombs, we started making something that the media called the cobalt bomb, because they only knew nuclear was bombs, right? And here's nuclear killing cancer, and how does that happen? So they called it the cobalt bomb. Then we get into the sad story of nuclear accidents and the environmental impact of these accidents. Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, probably no one remembers 3 Mile Island, but that was like the first biggie in the 1970s. And Fukushima, I may add
Chernobyl?
Did I say Chernobyl?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so those three, and then possibly some other. But the first big one was at the NRX reactor at Chalk River. How many knew that? Probably nobody. But that was like the first big nuclear accident, and it profoundly affected how Canada deals with its safety policy, nuclear safety policy. Then we get into the non-proliferation regime. This is safeguards. This is the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, where I worked for 8 years, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So making sure that people do not use nuclear energy, peaceful uses of energy, of nuclear, to make nuclear weapons. Because you will always be able to use one to do the other. And the thing that stops you doing that, besides good intentions, are international safeguards that kind of polices the whole thing. We'll talk about the nuclear regulatory environment in Canada, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, and international oversight as well. So there's an international component to that. So yeah, the course will be sort of like focused on Canada, and then how does that fit into the global scene. We'll talk about nuclear and renewables and nuclear waste, because these are extremely important topics to the public. If you were to ask the public what's top of mind for nuclear, first thing will be bombs, and then it'll be what about the waste, and what about radiation, and why aren't we building more renewables, and why are we building SMRs in the first place? The evolving nuclear workforce. So that's the topic we're just talking about. So it is evolving in many ways. It's getting more diverse, as I was saying, from different backgrounds. Also, thankfully, there's more women in the workforce. It's still not 50%.
Engineering, we're over 50 now.
Excellent. And that's what we have to do. We have to get from the STEM early grades up through the universities. It has to be, at least 50-50. Why? Because the population is 50-50, or 49-51, whatever it actually is. Nuclear in popular culture will be a fun bit. We'll look at The Simpsons and the Oppenheimer movie and the China Syndrome, which was a movie that came out in the 1970s, oddly at the same time as the 3 Mile Island accident, oddly the same reactor and the same accident. So they were depicting an accident. Hollywood made a movie about an accident in a reactor, and then about a week and a half later, that accident happened in a reactor of that type. And so people were actually going to the movie theaters to learn about what was happening in Pennsylvania, because there wasn't a lot of clear information coming out on the news about that. and and video games too. Oh, and Back to the Future. There's plutonium. How many gigawatts of plutonium?
Gigawatts.
Gigawatts of plutonium. Yeah. Anyway, so it's not just fun, but this actually speaks to how society perceives nuclear, and nothing in nuclear technically happens without society giving the go-ahead, and so that's why it's very important to know what society, what public thinks about it. Then we're getting to the end of the course, the role of nuclear technology in sustainable development. So now we're getting into what nuclear can do to raise the standard of living in other countries. So forget about Ontario, we're doing pretty well for ourselves, but other countries don't have access to reliable electricity. And how can they get access to reliable electricity? And why would it be nuclear and not renewables in that case? So we'll talk about that. And that's it, that's the course, in a nutshell.
Awesome. So
A big
these
nutshell.
two courses kind of form the foundation of the minor, but there's also 3 different streams that kind of include them. What are the objectives of each of these streams, as well as the academic requirements, and who might they appeal to student-wise?
So I'll take that one. So there's 3 streams. Stream 1 is nuclear engineering, which is mainly meant for students in the Faculty of Engineering and Faculties of Science. There's a big course list, a ton of courses that the students can pick from. One difference between Stream 1 versus the other streams is there's 2 specific courses that you have to take. Coincidentally, I'm teaching them. Probably change at some point. But yeah, so the first one's EngPhys 3D04, that's an Intro to Nuclear Engineering course. And then the second one is EngPhys 493, Advanced Nuclear Engineering Design. And that's where you learn a lot, like I would say, directly useful things in the nuclear industry as an engineer. And then there's a whole bunch of other ones you can take. Several of them, if you're, let's say, in other streams, let's say materials engineering, civil engineering, mechanical, you may be taking them anyways. And that's where, again, to the previous point, that's where you can do a little bit double dipping. Those students, that very much a direct line of sight, the nuclear energy industry. Stream 2 is really a nuclear medicine. And so that would be targeting a bit more on like the health sciences side and some of the science students as well. And really what that's looking at is like radiopharmaceuticals. If you're looking at, dealing with all sorts of medical isotopes for the diagnoses and treatment of cancer. So obviously, very important industry. This is, I think, a good example of where nuclear is not just energy, right? The nuclear medicine area is another industry that's not just energy. The third one is nuclear studies in society, where it's focusing a bit more on like the humanities and business and other sides. In terms of those students, there's a lot more flexibility in Stream 3. There is a course list. That list is a bit shorter. However, what you can do with Stream 3 is you can pick and choose courses from the other streams, provided that you meet the prerequisites of that course. So that's definitely, I think any student doing the minor, you should definitely talk to your academic advisor, but definitely do that for the Stream 3. At the end, there's 2 culminating courses that you take one out of the 2. One of them is like a final end of program capstone kind of course. The whole idea is like it's a 1-semester course where you work on a big project, and the goal there, see how well this works in practice, the goal is to have like a project, but like you might have a business student with a humanities student, a science student, and an engineering student all work on a project, and you have like a truly interdisciplinary project. So that's kind of the vision for that course. And the other one, often called the Magic Nuclear School Bus. The whole idea is to get students onto a bus, and we're going to go take you to some real nuclear facilities. Whoops. Yeah, so hopefully they weren't on the bus. So we're going to get these students onto a bus, and let's go to actual real facilities, right? The whole idea with that course is, not textbook smart, that's street smart. So get in the real world. I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could I just add quickly onto Marcus? So one thing to note is that the lists are not final by any means. Marcus is doing a lot of footwork right now in meeting with people that are just learning about the minor for the first time. And what we're seeing is a lot of attention, a lot of positive reception from our cross-campus partners, folks who think that they have courses that intersect with nuclear that we'd like to get added to the list. It takes a lot of time. There's a huge lead time in order to make some of these changes, but we're slowly growing the lists as appropriate.
It's more likely that course will be added than removed.
Yes.
Perfect. And then kind of touching on that idea you talked about the real world application of everything that a student might learn in this minor. What are sort of the job or career applications of this minor, either of the streams, so whether or not it's the first stream or the second and third stream, what could students who get involved in this kind of be looking to apply their learning to job-wise?
I guess I'll take this one again. Anyone has to
Yeah,
add to that? I mean, there's a lot of big companies and organizations here in Canada. I'll start with the nuclear energy side. Ontario Power Generation, Bruce Power, Atkins Realis, blah, 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 all on this nuclear energy side. The first two companies I mentioned OPG and Bruce Power, they're the utilities that actually operate these plants. So like you might automatically think, okay, well, that sounds very engineering-like. Not totally the case. They have a lot of people and teams within them that'll do things like outreach, community engagement. OPG has a department just on Indigenous relations. And I know here at McMaster we have a whole department on the Indigenous education, right? So like that's a perfect like beeline to a job market. Same goes with, for example, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. They have a combination of engineers, scientists, but a lot of people in like social sciences as well. Canadian Nuclear Laboratories up in Chalk River, they got a whole plethora of different fields: nuclear medicine, nuclear science, nuclear engineering, social studies, business. Oh yeah, business as well. Are there any business students in the audience? Maybe? No? We should really get more business people. Okay, so I guess this will be for the iPhone. So like tons of stuff for business people. Business development is huge, right? So like there's a lot of companies that are looking to sell their reactors. And these projects are not small. The Darlington New Nuclear Project is $21 billion, and that's considered a small project. Atkins Realis, they're looking to sell these units. These are tens of billions of dollars for each project. Same with Westinghouse. So they need business people for those kind of things. Hopefully that answers. All right, do you guys have any other to add to that?
Can I add to that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
We just hosted through the Engineering and Management program, NAYGN, which is a construction company.
Right.
But they brought 3 of their senior leaders from their nuclear division. They are the ones building some of these new reactors. Their president attended and said that he would hire virtually anyone we could provide him with. They just have such a need for people with both a nuclear background who also want to get into helping them sell projects, get commissions, project manage large building projects, and they work around the world. So incredible diversity there.
I can give two further examples. So one would be mining companies. The mining sector is seen as probably the first movers on building microreactors in the north of Canada, because they have the capital, they have the need. There's lots of resources in the north of Canada, and what's keeping it in the ground and not out is energy. You need to be able to get energy there to heat the mine. And so they're basically saying, where are these microreactors? Because we can't run a pipe with natural gas all the way from the western part of Canada, and we don't want to bring in fossil fuels. This nuclear sounds great, runs for 20 years without being refueled. Where is it? And that's when you say, oh yeah, those things we were talking about, they're just on paper. However, when these things are available, they are going to snatch them up. And so mining engineers, geologists, if there's local population, you'll have the social science, the business folks. There's nothing there to do with nuclear traditionally, but everything to do with nuclear because of the infrastructure. So that's one area. The question about that, or okay. The second example is close to home for me because my son he's a mechanical engineer, and he's applying to get a job at the CNSC, and it's the job is certification engineer. So it's a certification engineer, basically does this license application, follow all the standards. It doesn't have to have anything to do with nuclear, but if you have nuclear on your resume, you are a mechanical engineer who has a nuclear minor, you obviously would bubble to the top of that process. Now, he didn't have a nuclear minor, so he basically asked his dad everything about that he needed to know before he went into the interview. And still waiting to hear, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback on this. If I'm understanding the question as like, what does this do for your employment prospects? Just take the example of an engineering graduate, right? From McMaster, you'll graduate. There'll maybe be 700 students alongside you, and then there will be another 700 from Waterloo at the same time, and then from U of T, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so everyone's looking for an angle or a means to differentiate themselves from the pack, from the rest of the audience. Now, to me, nuclear is not something that is very straightforward. It's not very simple. And I do believe that it does look very impressive to have a minor degree in something like nuclear and society. Actually, funny story, my wife was recently interviewing at Atkins Realis, and they mentioned to her, she's a hydrogeologist, they started mentioning to her that they were working on a couple of nuclear projects, and she said, yeah, my husband is working on a nuclear minor over at McMaster. And like it was like the interview had stopped, and all of the panelists wanted to know more about this minor. And they're asking her questions like, what's the minor about, all this stuff. She's like, I don't know, like I'm not him. So like you're seeing from the industry side, like there is a lot of interest in a minor like this. It is very unique. I'm not saying do it just for the sake of doing it. I'm saying do it because it's an incredible learning experience for a topic that more people should know about. And honestly, I think that more people would like to know more about given the opportunity. And I think it would do you all a lot to get the minor.
Is there a question?
Yeah, if I, as a student, wanted to perhaps go to a NAYGN run event to learn about what companies are interested in hiring students in nuclear, do you have anything like that?
Well, yes, we do. We have industry night in January, so that will convene a whole bunch of companies that are looking to hire co-op students or recent grads as well. And it's a great opportunity for any undergrad student to come out and chat with prospective employers. Yes, good question.
January 21st, 2026, I believe.
At 5:45 p.m. I think.
Throwing it out there.
It's also the one that runs every single year, so we should probably follow NAYGN on Instagram, right?
Yes, we
Yeah,
should.
I think so. I'm gonna go
What's
do
Instagram?
that right
Oh.
now.
Yeah, at this point, I'll also open it up to if anyone here has any questions. Those were kind of the core list of things that other students wanted to know about, but yeah, any questions from anyone here as well are welcome.
Can I just put a comment before to get
Yeah.
this going? So there's some questions about like industry, like working at jobs and all that. So one of the things we're trying to do with the minor is like close the gap between the student experience and like getting a job. And so one of the things we've been doing is we've got several guest speakers from industry. So Kyle's 103 course, we have a director from Ontario Power Generation that's going to give a talk. You know what's OPG, working at jobs and that kind of stuff. I think you're thinking about getting some guest speakers.
Yes,
For-
haven't narrowed it down yet.
Perfect. 304, on Thursday, we have Nuclear Waste Management Organization coming. Next month, we're going to have former CEO of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. Next semester, for the other course, we'll have Westinghouse and BWXT coming. So, like, yeah, these are big companies, and they're going to hire a lot of people. So, like, they specifically ask, can we come talk to students? You know, we want to hire them, we want to talk to them. So, hopefully that bridges that gap. But follow NAYGN Mac on Instagram. Any questions from the audience? You guys have been really quiet.
Absorbing.
Ariana, you got any questions? I'm going to put you on the spot.
There are specific questions for my very confusing academic situation that I will not burden the recording.
Yeah. Can I also say, if you have general questions about the minor, you're welcome to contact the iLead office. So it's iLead, I-L-E-A-D, @mcmaster.ca. If we cannot answer your question, we will put you in touch with the right person to make sure that you are informed of the courses, when registration will open, capacities, etc.
Well, I guess I actually have a question myself. I was just thinking about this. We talked a lot about the Canadian applications. How does kind of nuclear and education in nuclear studies kind of fit into an international context? I don't know if anyone can comment on that.
How does the Canadian?
Yeah, like what's the international context for nuclear, and how could like a Canadian student who maybe is like an international student sort of go and that?
Well, I can speak for one of the biggest international organizations in nuclear is the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, in Vienna, Austria, which is one of the most beautiful cities on the planet. And if ever there's a reason to get into nuclear, it's to go to a meeting at the IAEA in Vienna, Austria. But there are about 60 or 70 Canadians working full time at the IAEA, and it's across the board of disciplines. So there's physics, chemistry, there's social science folks, there's business, there's IT people there. I worked in non-proliferation. I'm a reactor physicist, so I took reactor physics here at Mac in EngPhys, and got into non-proliferation. But also they have internships, and so students who are either, I think it's if you got at least 3 years into a program, and then wherever you are in a program, your undergrad still or your master's or your PhD, you can do an internship over there and live in Vienna for a year, and they pay a small amount of money, not a lot, but I think it pays the rent. But importantly, you make a lot of contacts over there. It's one big networking opportunity from anywhere in the world. There's 183 countries that send people to the IAEA, and they're all walking around the hallways. And any meeting you're in, there's like 20 countries represented. So you make a lot of interactions. The IAEA is just one aspect of the international scene out there. So there's the Nuclear Energy Agency in Paris. So the IAEA is in Vienna, the NEA is in Paris, another beautiful city. And they also have interns, and it's just a similar kind of thing. It's an international, like an organization that generates reports. The IAEA creates standards, the safety standards that Canada follows for its reactor operation they start with the standards of the IAEA, and then the CNSC, the regulator in Canada, incorporates them into its regulations. So it has this role, the IAEA has this role of sort of being a, like international governance of all of the nuclear industries in the world. So you get involved with them, you basically are seeing how the world uses nuclear energy. And it's not just nuclear energy, it's nuclear isotopes. And it's not just isotopes for medicine, but it's isotopes for following groundwater. So you can improve groundwater availability to countries in Africa that are suffering because they don't have as much water as they need. They also need energy too. So isotopes for groundwater, extending the shelf life of food, and energy so that they can have lights on at night so that you can read after you finish working and raise your standard of living in your education. That's nuclear. International.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so no business students. I see some engineering students. Are there science students in the class in here? Got science? Amazing. Another science. Any humanities here? No? Social sciences? No? Any other faculty I didn't get? So it's mostly engineering, some science. Okay. Thank you.
Your job's cut out for you.
Well, I'll be busy. Yeah, I'll be busy.
Great. Okay, I guess one kind of final question to close things out, unless anyone again has any questions. But what positions McMaster to kind of like what is the unique context at McMaster that makes this minor sort of worth participating in or worth taking?
We got a
beyond the
reactor next
content?
door.
Yeah.
That's one. We have all these like facilities here that people can use that you can't find at other universities, at least in Canada. Not just the reactor, there's also the Royal Military College. They got a small slowpoke reactor. But we have a whole bunch of other facilities. We make, massive supply of iodine-125 here on site, which is used for diagnosis and treatment of prostate cancer. That ties in and weaves into many aspects of the minor.
So I did have a question. So I know like if you go into like NGPhys, for example, and you specialize in nuclear, and if you additionally do the minor in nuclear, do you think that like really narrows down your other job opportunities if you ever do want to extend into something else?
No, so if you don't mind me asking, what's your major?
I'm an Eng1.
You're an Eng1?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I would say like the minor, like one of the advantages of the like there's pros and cons of, let's say, NGPhys, nuclear engineering major, or like engineering, whatever, with a nuclear minor. The nuclear minor gives you a lot of flexibility. So like if you want to go into like the automotive industry, let's say you pick mechanical, right? You do mechanical engineering and then you do the nuclear minor and you decide, nuts to this like nuclear industry stuff. I'm going to go in the automotive sector. Nothing preventing you from doing
Yeah,
that.
because I was considering going into Eng-Phys and doing nuclear, but then if I ever do decide to change my mind.
So here's the thing that, you know, you have I would say like one of the big key, I think, takeaways from this nuclear minor is that you got a lot of flexibility, right? Like I'll give you an example, right? So like let's say if you're really thinking, I don't know about mechanical engineering or let's say Eng-Phys. If you do mechanical and you do the nuclear minor, you can still take the nuclear courses in Eng-Phys.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So you could still, or if civil engineering or whatever it might be. Yeah, Derek?
I'd like to add on, in the thermofluids substream of mechanical, they do offer you to take nuclear engineering courses from Eng-Phys as well. So that is a very possible thing you can do in mechanical.
I just want to add something about the specializations in Eng-Phys, being the Eng-Phys academic advisor. I just want to make sure that it's very clear that the specializations in Eng-Phys are not official specializations, so your diploma will read engineering physics. If you do the minor, then you get the notation on your transcript as well, clarifying that you have this minor. The specializations in Eng-Phys are fantastic and they help you narrow down your tech electives, but they don't actually show as a specialization anywhere. So I just wanted to clarify that in case anyone had
Let me give you an
questions about
example.
that.
I went to Queens Mechanical Engineering and I specialized in aerospace. Now look at me, I'm doing nuclear stuff. Doing aerospace.
To speak to Eng-Phys specifically, because I'm an Eng-Phys alumni, and you know, color me biased, but I think that Eng-Phys graduates can do anything. I graduated with someone who ended up going to U of T for med school, and now he's a surgeon. He did Eng-Phys. I genuinely believe Eng-Phys graduates can do anything.
That's another question I think probably flew here.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if this question has already been answered, but about the overlap between Eng-Phys courses and the nuclear engineering minor courses, like their overlap, how does that work with how many are allocated to each part of your degree and what's permitted?
Yep. So we did talk about this a bit earlier, but that's okay. So we do call that double dipping, where you're using a course to satisfy both your major requirement and your minor requirement. You can do that with up to 12 units of this minor. So up to 12 units must be elective to your degree, which means they can be used as tech electives as well though. So in Eng-Phys specifically, and most of the engineering disciplines, there is so much overlap that truly you can integrate this entire minor into an engineering degree quite easily. For students that are not in engineering, we can still get things integrated into your degree. There may just not be as much overlap as there would be with the engineering disciplines.
Sorry, as a follow-up.
Yeah.
Do you know if that fits into the iBio schedule as well? Because I'm iBio Eng-Phys and I know it's already a 5-year program. I don't know if this would add a 6th year.
No, what year are you in right now?
Third.
We could probably still make something work. I would recommend coming and meeting with me so we could piece together what it would look like adding the minor to your degree. And I encourage all students, even if you are just slightly interested, go and see how it fits into your degree. Talk to your academic advisor, sit down and build out a degree plan. Because I know that adding time to your degree is often a factor that may deter students from doing a minor, but it's always good to check because a lot of students assume that it is going to add time to their degree. I have worked with many students for this minor and for other minors where it does not add a day onto their degree. So talk to your advisor, see how it works before you decide not to do it. Okay.
Yeah. I have a question. So I'm in Earth and Environmental Sciences. Will I have to take like engineering classes, or like is the no? So I won't have to, or like I know that you said that the course list is like it's pretty broad. Does it also have like science incorporated, or is it more like the 1N03 and 1N02, or like the ones that you're running now? Is it more like the humanities style, or will like that look like?
Yeah, so there's 3 different streams. One is the nuclear engineering stream, and that one's a little bit unique in the sense that if you're doing that one, there are a couple extra requirements. But there's also a stream 2, which is more focused on nuclear medicine, and then there's a stream 3 that's more general, more broad. That's where you start to get into like humanities and those types of topics. And if you were approaching or attempting that third stream, you get to dabble in courses from the other lists as well. So no, it's not just engineering courses.
Yeah, I think there's like a history course and some other stuff in the third
Yeah,
stream.
community engagement course.
Oh yeah, I even have it here.
Yeah.
Even printed. Maybe I should look at it. So yeah, you can check out the website. There's a giant list of them. Like in course list, sorry, you're in which faculty?
Science.
Oh,
Earth and
okay.
environment.
So you could like, here, there's environmental philosophy, for example, in course list 3, as one example. Causes of war, public opinion and policy. If you're interested in
Ethics course.
yeah, if you're thinking about, let's say, this is why we gave you options, right? So you can choose it. If you decide to go like nuclear medicine, as one example, you can do like radiation biology or like environmental catastrophes. Those are, of course, I'm just listing out the list.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I did. You mentioned a magic school bus course, like a field course.
Yeah. There's got to be like a lady with frizzly hair and a lizard. That's my goal.
I was wondering what locations you had in mind that students could potentially visit.
So this course will probably cause me the greatest grief, but I think will probably have the greatest benefit to students. And I say that because it's just going to cost a lot of money. So one of the things, the bigger challenge I'm trying to do right now is just being able to pay for it all. So I'm just being honest, right? So in order for this course to really be delivered, I'm working on getting sponsorships from industry. So our industry partners, I'm hoping, can help pay for that. To answer your question, there are a few organizations that I have in my mind. I haven't approached them yet because I'm trying to pay for it first. But that includes the Darlington Nuclear Generating Station on the east end of Toronto. It's actually go see a power plant. There's 2 facilities, on the east end as well that do fuel manufacturing. There's a Cameco. Cameco has a few plants there. Beta XT has a plant in Peterborough. I've had tours for students there several times over the years. There's those guys. Depending on how things work out with financing, maybe go out to Chalk River, which would be a great experience for the students. But this, again, then the costs go up. So that just gives you a bit of a flavor of what we're kind of thinking. There's a few other options as well. Like NWMO has like a site in Oakville where you can go visit and see like a sample and placement room. Sheridan Park has some facilities as well. Hope that helps.
Yeah, part of the minor requirements is that course or the other course 4N, and it's for the reasons that Marcus has said. It's what we're trying to do here is very ambitious, translates to very expensive. So there may be some years where things are just not able to work out, but at least the other option will be available for those that are looking to complete the minor.
I was wondering, I think we had a poll in 1N03 regarding if 2N03 will be available during spring, summer semesters, or future, like 1N03, 2N03. Can I follow up on that? How is it looking?
There was a poll. When was the poll?
I don't know. There was like I remember filling out a Microsoft form, being like, I would be interested in taking out 2N03. Am I like remembering this wrong?
You're getting nods around the room, so people are
Okay.
agreeing with you.
Okay. So
Did I administer this poll?
Do you have a young child at home? That's excusable.
This is so funny.
I don't know. It was a Microsoft form. I just wanted to know if it's.
I
still,
did?
like,
What did it say?
It was like, do you have an interest in taking 2N03 and the fourth year course as well? It was like, do you have interest in pursuing the nuclear?
I said, what are your current plans? Is it 1N? Is it 1N plus 2N? Is it 1N, 2N, 4N? Or is it the whole thing?
Yeah.
I never said anything about the summer, did I?
I don't know if you said this.
Oh, well, maybe I'm crazy. Well, I was gonna ask, is there any chance? Do you think there's any chance for 2N03 being offered in spring, summer? Because I don't think I'll be here next semester, but I want to continue the minor.
So one of the things being an interdisciplinary minor is that we want to make this as accessible as possible, especially with some future programs coming down the pipeline and 1N and 2N playing critical roles in those programs. The goal is accessibility, and hopefully we'll be able to share some plans for other offerings of the courses in the coming months or however, but still working on it.
I'll give it another second if anyone has any last questions. Is there anything else that anyone would like to mention about the minor before we kind of wrap things up? Anything that a question didn't address you'd like to mention, or?
I like to put one out. So they're students from a whole bunch of different programs. One thing you might want to think about doing is doing a co-op. The minor, I think, will help you getting co-ops if you're looking to do something in the industry. Every time I talk to our industry partners, they keep saying, yeah, I'd love to get your students in for co-ops. So if you're, depending on wherever you are in your program, maybe you want to think about applying to co-ops. Co-ops, internships, it's all good. Yep.
With that, you might not be able to answer this, but I'm in first year. And does McMaster do first year co-ops? Can I still look for one, even though it's not a part of, because my program, it starts third year, and they say it's a year long, and I can extend my degree. But can I do it in first year anyways, the summer, or is that not an option? Because for example, my brother's at Western, and he has done co-op every summer, as well as that third year co-op. Is that possible here?
I would say that it depends on your faculty. So each faculty does have their own co-op policies. In engineering, students are able to do a co-op after level 1. In the spring, summer, if it is pre-approved by co-op, typically students will do it later, but I would just recommend reaching out to your co-op advisor, your academic advisor, just to double check. But across the university, there are students doing co-op after level 1. Your faculty might have very specific rules about that though. Okay?
I had a question. I was wondering, maybe this is a bit silly, but how would you recommend bringing up pursuing the minor in an interview for potential co-op or maybe post-grad? Do you have any advice for how to talk about it or how to bring it up that could be beneficial?
So bringing up in an interview organically that you're currently in the process, because you can't claim it until the very end, right, of your. Yeah, I mean, every interview that's for a company worth working at is going to ask you to tell them about yourself. You could say, this is who I am, this is what I'm studying, I'm also pursuing this minor degree in this topic, nuclear studies and society. I think it's just as simple as that. And if you're in a situation anything like my wife, people are going to ask questions about it.
I can tell you that as a hiring manager in a former life, what you're looking for is what is the delta between, because you're going to have all these applications, they all have the same degree basically, or a very similar looking degree, and you almost go okay, blah, 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 yes, they got the degree, they apparently attended all the classes, they apparently did quite well. Now, how is this, what makes them different from the other 500 applicants? And so that's not just, I took nuclear as a minor, but I like canoeing, or I like birds, so those things that people say, the interest items actually make an impact, because you're going like this, and this person sings in musical theater, that's interesting, and it kind of, whatever stops the person and makes them pause. So I took a nuclear minor at McMaster. McMaster, I've heard of McMaster, and they have a nuclear minor. They have a reactor there, don't they? Yes. And then you read further, and that, it's sad, but it does come down to like shiny objects attracting the hiring manager.
Awesome. All right, well with that, thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking the time. Do a little and all of the information that was referenced here in terms of the requirements and the different streams are available online, so please check them out because you probably can't remember everything that was talked about, so it is online. And if you have any further questions, any specific academic pathway questions, I'm sure that would be a good time to ask them, but yeah, thank you everyone for coming out, and be sure to give NAYGN a follow on Instagram.
Yes.
And stay tuned for the industry night in January, where a lot of these companies that we're talking about will be present. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.